Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Samantha. You may recognize me. I was class of 2018, then I did a master's, then I worked in the industry for a few years, mostly as an artist. I did some UX consulting as well, and now I'm back here doing some research, and I teach sometimes also. So today we're going to be talking about success in the games industry. Quick show of hands, audience poll, very controversial topic. Who wants to make great games? Awesome. Yeah, that's why you're here, right? In this program, I mean, to make stuff, to make good stuff. But what does that mean? What does success mean? Here's the obligatory Merriam-Webster dictionary cliche. We want the outcome of our work to be favorable. Great, very helpful, right? But what makes a game successful traditionally? Well, one of the things is you want to make a great game, one that players love, one that's high quality, one that brings in the rave reviews, one that critics love. Maybe it'll grace the sacred teleprompter of Keeley one day. But this isn't the only thing, right? You want to make money, you want to do numbers, you got to pay the bills, you want a game that flies off the shelves. Not the shelves anymore, but you get what I'm saying. Maybe one day you will be in that coveted top 10 video games of all time list by sales numbers on Wikipedia. Maybe you'll spawn a ton of merch and you'll bring in all those sweet royalties and people will be walking around in t-shirts with your game all over the front of them. So maybe our definition of success in game dev is a high quality game that sells well, right? But if I pop this sentence on the screen, what does this mean to you? Anybody? Does this sentence make sense? What does it mean? Yeah.
Maybe it was like a very good game.
Exactly. Right. Anyone in here play the original Okami? Psychonauts, Grim Fandango, Beyond Good and Evil, Conker's Bad Fur Day. All games that at least initially were kind of commercial bombs, or at least did not recoup their budget in the way that studios were hoping, but they were still great games. So maybe our definition is a little bit incomplete. If I tell you this sentence here, it made a huge profit, but it wasn't successful. What does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything, right? It doesn't mean anything. You wouldn't hear someone say this. If a game makes a huge profit, it gets described as successful. That is how we use that word. Yeah?
If that can exist,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But the company will not then describe that game as a success. We might say that, but the company will say it wasn't successful. They won't say it'll make a huge profit, though. They'll say it fell short of expectations. So the way we see this, you won't typically see this written anywhere. It doesn't really make a ton of sense. So our definition really gets left to this, right? Success is about making money. And where does this get us? Well, we'll look at a game that's a huge success. And we want to be something like that, right? We've got the numbers, we've got the player count, we've got pretty good reviews, we're good. But look at this headline. Can we really call this a success? Can we have success and layoffs in the same headline and feel good about that as an industry? Like, is this where growth gets us when we talk about immediately skyrocketing to huge player numbers, huge revenue numbers? I know their Seattle team, the team that was laid off for this game specifically, was only 6 people, though the parent company, NetEase, made a bunch more cuts in kind of the same breath, more or less. But, what happened? Well, they didn't want to pay them, of course. They didn't want to pay that team. $136 million in a month, that's barely enough for a high-rise apartment full of gold toilets. A CEO can't live on that. So this is where we are. And this is not working for anyone. It maybe works for some of us some of the time temporarily, but you're always living with that fear. You're always going, is it ever going to be enough? And we keep repeating this pattern over and over and over again. We see this happening in the industry. In the past couple of years, it's been happening more and more, and people are paying attention to it, but this cycle keeps happening. But why is that? Well, as James Carville said, it's the economy, stupid, right? We got to make the line go up. If the number goes up, then we're really happy, and if the number goes down, we're sad. So in other words, we have to grow. We always have to grow. The number always has to go up. But does this really tell us collectively if we're actually doing well? And what cost does this growth come at? Are our communities worth it? Is our health worth it? Is our humanity worth it? Is the planet worth it? Is it? How do we look at all of this and do better? One approach, broadly speaking, is this whole discipline that we've been looking into with our recent work called post-growth economics. It's basically a big fancy word to say that we stop using GDP growth as the be-all, end-all. Stop using that to define our success. And obviously that's hard. That's a huge ask. But when we look at something like economic growth, it was a proxy for progress in our society for a long time. It was something that kind of correlated with things like people getting more rights and standards of living going up. But it was never perfect, and it's definitely a lot less perfect now. This is different from degrowth, if you've heard of that, and that post-growth doesn't say we definitely need to start shrinking the economy, rather that it's an option, but that we really shouldn't be caring about what that number does at all. So what should we care about? Well, the answer is to focus on the world actually getting better, right? And it's difficult to quantify that, but it's things like ensuring shelter and food and healthcare and electricity and employment and education and public services for everyone, while protecting the environment and keeping our little blue marble blue instead of, like a flaming ball of sulfur. And this starts with replacing GDP with something like HDI, or the level of warming that we can anticipate. And the policies that support this are things like labor regulations and wealth taxes and funding public infrastructure, environmental regulations. But how is this relevant to game development, right? Well, it turns out that our industry is pretty well suited to at least start adopting some parts of this mindset in certain ways. We're not the oil industry. We're not fast fashion. Our biggest material impact is stuff like rare earths and plastic. But we can make those things go a really long way if we are smart. And if we're talking about PC and mobile games, those are chunks of plastic and metal that people need in their daily lives already, that we can kind of piggyback off of those resources to provide more entertainment, more meaning, more art in people's lives with less of an environmental impact. And energy-wise, we can make really simple choices that help us save that energy, and green electricity initiatives that can reduce the impact of all of our usage and our footprint as an industry. And when we talk about working conditions and labor rights and quality of life, that's kind of the biggest piece for our industry, right? But we don't need any huge breakthroughs in science and technology to make our working conditions better, to make our quality of lives better as workers and as game developers. We have remote and flexible work, and we can organize for even better work-life balance, better compensation, unionization, fair compensation for workers all over the world, and not exercising willful blindness when it comes to things like exploitative contracts with workers in the global south. We can also look at things like democratization in the industry, right? You used to absolutely definitively need a huge publisher to get anything out there into the industry and succeed in any sense. But now even a small team or even just one guy can get a game out there and potentially be really successful with that game. We have engines, we have educational resources, we have digital distribution. And it probably seems a little hypocritical that a ton of these developments appear to be driven by huge companies. But the first video games were developed at public universities. The internet was invented with taxpayer money and grants. So was the touchscreen. So were microchips. And of course, there was plenty of private enterprise involved in those developments as well. History is complicated, but we don't need to depend on these economic systems never changing at all forever to keep our knowledge growth going. And as game developers, we now have these more community-driven efforts like Itch, which has an open revenue sharing model and for at least now is completely independent. We've got Godot, an open source engine that becomes increasingly impressive with every year. It can honestly stand toe-to-toe with Unity in a lot of respects now, and it gets better with every new project published as well. One of the core ideas in post-growth, when we look at all of these things in game dev that kind of point to maybe this future where we can have more agency as workers and better quality of life, is that industries that kind of help form communities and minimize material impact will really help transition the economy from one that's bent on taking resources out of the planet to something where we can prosper together without doing that, right? Actual value created for other humans and things like care, craft, creativity, service. So not only can we do well as game devs, but we as game devs might be able to help nudge the needle just a little bit in kind of getting our whole economic system a little bit more towards the future. But how do we do this? How do we look at all of this in the games industry and start to do better? Well, on the environmental side, it's pretty obvious, right? Try to minimize your impact, make sustainable decisions, say no to NFTs and like the generative AI in every single facet of every single thing, and whatever new thing the tech bros will try to sell you next year that takes up the same amount of energy as the Netherlands or whatever. But the biggest practical challenge that we have is going to come from real structural change, right? It's going to be things like unions, cooperative ownership, workplace democracy, especially now. For most of you in this room, though, your careers haven't officially started yet. But you can go into them with the seed of something better that will hopefully assist you in your journey to organize, to make your part of the industry a better place. So we start here from the same place that post-growth starts, with our definition of success. Because that's what defines what we want, right? And therefore, that in turn defines our strategy. It defines what we do. And our actions, those consequences of those actions then determine the type of world that we live in. So we really want to look at changing what we mean by success beyond just making the number go up. Post-growth looks at GDP and says we can do better than that. We can look at, ARPDAO, at sales, and say we can do better than that. We're not going to throw money out the window and pretend that doesn't exist. I mean, we live in a real world where we have to pay rent. But we want to look at how we're running things and saying, is the number getting bigger? Is that really our end goal? Is that the thing that's going to guide all of our strategy? Is that it? No, we can do better than that. So how are we going to do this? Well, let's break it down. We need to understand what we want, right? And that's not going to change. We're human beings. We don't have to change kind of who we are innately. We really want to change how we measure it, though, right? Because the number is not a good substitute for a lot of the stuff that we really want out of our lives. And that'll help us get a more holistic picture of success that aligns with what we need and want. And lastly, we can understand how we can properly reflect on what we've done and kind of move forward from that and change our strategy. So starting with motivation. Years of psychology research have shown us this, right? We want to maximize subjective well-being. What is subjective It's happiness. We want to be happy. Revolutionary, I know. You've probably seen this on a poster somewhere. It's from this paper. It's 82 years old. It lives up to the hype, I will say. It's worth all the posters. It's not perfect. It's 82 years old, but there's definitely a lot of hits in there that are still true today. So let's boil this down to kind of the pieces that are most relevant to our work in game development. Security, this is the foundation of everything else. And on a physiological level, this is stuff like food and water and shelter. And today it's also stuff like paying your internet bill and saving for retirement and not feeling like you're going to lose everything if you go without a paycheck for a couple of months. And once we have that, kind of our other wants from life all build on top of that, right? You want to be proud of yourself. You want to feel good about your work, about what you've done. You want to be proud of the ways you've affected other people, the way both you and your work have had an impact on them. And you also want to be proud of how you've developed yourself, both as a professional and as a person. And as you develop yourself as a person and the people around you, we also want to feel love, right? This is love in the philosophical sense, the connected sense, that kind of love of friends, of family, of your community. You like to have those people in your life. You like to feel respected and valued. And this comes not just from family and friends in your personal life, but in your work from teammates, from your peers, from players, from other people in the industry. And once you have all of this together, we get to kind of the crux of it, right? And this is why you got into game development, probably for most of you. I mean, why did you guys get into game development? Why this program? Show of hands, one word if you had to say. Yes?
My answer is passion.
Passion, amazing. Okay, that's perfect. That's what I have right here in my notes. Most people are here for that, right? This is probably the motivation in game development. You're not You're not choosing game development as a major because you think you're going to be the richest person in the world. This is the motivation. Maslow, the guy who wrote that 82-year-old paper, said that musicians must make music, painters must paint. You feel like you got to make something. You have to put yourself into your work. That's how you feel fulfilled as a person. Lastly, this one, not really in Maslow's paper, but I feel like this is something that really kind of presses on all of us now more, that we have a broader awareness of the world than we have had in past decades. We want to be good people, right? Nobody goes into the industry saying, I'm going to be the next Randy Pitchford. Like, we want to make the world a better place with our games and what we do. Or at the very least, we want to make it not a worse place. And this means avoiding exploiting workers, having yourself be exploited, having players be exploited, having the planet be exploited. So these are all of the things that we want. And the question becomes, how does this kind of translate into our idea of success? If success is a favorable outcome, and we know the things that we favor, aka want, then what is success? There's a lot of different ways to measure this. Let's start with the old guard. Like I said, we're not going to pretend that we live in a fantasy world here. Hopefully one day money won't matter, but the truth is it really does. Why does it matter? Well, you got to pay the bills, right? You got to make rent somehow, and that's important, and that continues to be important. But there's another piece to how we look at money in society and the industry, right? It's something to be proud of. You want a gold Lambo. I feel like everybody has this realization at some point, or most people who aren't Elon Musk have this realization at some point that it's like, is it really something to be proud of? Is the number itself something to be proud of after the bills are paid and your family is fed? The people that actually have gold Lambos, I'm willing to be proven wrong, but everyone that has a gold Lambo is kind of a jerk. There is such a thing as too much. Culture tells us to want this, though. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you if you're looking at this and you're like, I'd kind of like to have a gold Lambo. I mean, nobody's immune to it, right? I mean, you see the nice building and you see the shiny and you're like, oh, it's aspirational. But is it the gold Lambo or the mansion or the yacht is that what we actually really want? No, right? Like, I mean, the comfort, we like security. But if you're sitting alone on a yacht and nobody likes you and you're not sure if your friends like you and nobody really likes the art you made, they just spent a ton of money on it and then forgot about it, like, you're really going to be happy? All of the research on increases in income says that beyond a certain point, kind of once your needs are taken care of, once you don't have to worry about your family or your kids' college or whatever, there's no impact on happiness anymore. There's actually some research to suggest that there's a dip in your happiness after a certain point. And it's not healthy, right? So for our purposes, I'm going to strike this second point, okay? That security need is important, but money itself, let's not tie that to pride. Let's not say that the bigger number is better in itself. Let's see money as a tool to keep the bills paid, and only that, a tool for our security in this world. And if you're ever managing a large amount, if you find yourself in a position of power at a huge studio, see it as a tool to keep your team employed and secure. Not fun money to, buy Bandcamp or something and then just lay everyone off. But we obviously do need to feel proud of our work. That's still a legitimate want. So where do we get that pride? Well, one place is from here, right? We want to make a game that people like, a game that's innovative, interesting, that brings joy to people. We want to provide happiness to ourselves by giving it to others. And maybe massive critical recognition is one way to do that. If you make a game that wins a bunch of awards, yes, be proud of that. But it's also just about making people happy. If one person likes one thing that you made, that's cool. You can be proud of that. Don't let it inflate your head and think, you can do whatever because one person said I was cool and now I can make stuff, and if everybody else doesn't like it, they just don't understand me. But being proud of the fact that one person liked a thing that you made is perfectly good. And this is a way that you can kind of map your success over time. This is another big one for pride as well. It's being proud of yourself, right? Our instinct to grow things and make numbers go up, it doesn't just have to be about the economy. We can redirect that into ourselves. You can become better at programming, at design, at art, at composing music, at whatever you want, at working with other people. And this is a huge practical benefit to your career and your ability to keep those bills paid in the future and your ability to support yourself. So it's 2 for 1, right? No stock photos or screenshots this time for this point. This is a cat I drew when I was a 12-year-old on DeviantArt. And this is a study of a tiger I painted a few years ago. And I've still got a lot of work to do as an artist, but I'm really happy that I've grown in my skills, right? I take a lot more joy in that than I do in just the raw idea of making more money or, getting a yacht someday. If the lights are on, I'd much rather be happy with myself than staring across the driveway at a Lambo. I'd really prefer to save that cash for a rainy day or spend it at the waffle fries at Soy Boys in Toronto. They're very good waffle fries. I know that because it's one of the many things I've learned by growing as a person. But yeah, personal development. It's a huge way to take that kind of growth instinct, that number go up instinct, and just apply it to yourself instead of a spreadsheet. So what about that all-important fulfillment, though, that crux, that passion? Artistic impact is kind of the big one here. And this is really about, did you say something? Are you saying something with what you're making? Lots of games that are successful in the traditional sense, aka make a ton of money, they don't really say anything. They're just kind of surgical money machines. And then that money often gets mismanaged and people lose their jobs anyway. Those games don't really have a lot of impact. And to make something impactful isn't to say that you need to have a huge impact for a ton of people. Maybe it's just something you're satisfied with. Maybe it's a story that you personally care about. Maybe it's just a nod to something that you personally care about that's been inserted into a surgical money machine for sentimentality reasons, and that's okay. Maybe it is a huge cultural impact. And lots of games, especially indie games, can make huge cultural impacts by really saying something about life, about the world, and about being human. So ask yourself, if your work can have that emotional impact, if it can inspire people to discuss, it's something that will really bring you fulfillment. And it can bring you extra recognition as well, of course, something else to be proud of. Games are art, we all know this, and getting respect for your work as art is extremely fulfilling. Inspiring others to create things like fan art as well, that's very fulfilling too. So really looking at that artistic impact piece as opposed to just do people like it, but did it make them think? Did it inspire them? It is really something that you can kind of take a lot away from. Another thing on the topic of inspiring others is community, right? This is about love. This is about making you feel loved by people enjoying the things that you create, because there's a piece of yourself in that thing that you've made. And it means something if your game can help connect other people to one another. We got to watch out here for toxic behavior, and of course there's still quite a streak of hatred that runs through some part of the gaming community, like all communities, but some communities are great. I mean, we should all be so lucky as to create something that catalyzes so much laughter, so much camaraderie, and so much culture among people. A lot of games have a dedicated community with players that uplift each other, and this doesn't just happen. These devs work to make it happen, both in their design and in how they engage with their players. So we can create these communities, we keep them healthy. This not only brings us love in our work, but it helps uplift our entire industry, the entire media culture around games, which is a beautiful thing. But none of these beautiful things could happen if we, destroy the earth. So sustainability in an environmental sense is something that's very important to our, feel-good instincts. It's also crucial to our security needs. We might think of this as an afterthought. I mean, a lot of companies do. There's a reason greenwashing is a thing. But you can't really keep the lights on if your house is on fire. So this is really key. And this is both about trying to be sustainable in your development, being cognizant of things like energy use, not letting all of your build machines in the office idle overnight, material use, where your money is coming from, looking at all the big banks that pour all of their money into fossil fuel investments and so on. But it's also about what we say in our games. You don't have to be overtly environmental in every game you make to say something. You certainly can if you want to. But kind of moments in games can cultivate a respect for the planet, for ecology, for life. And I mean, we all know that art helps shape how people think. So you really want to be conscious of kind of thinking about what your art is saying to people and how it's making them think about the world. Save this one for last because it's the biggest one. This is both from a selfish standpoint, because we're all workers here, and a kind of critical future of how our whole society works standpoint. This relates to all of our needs. I mean, nobody feels safe working under the shadow of layoffs, so security's out the window if you don't have this. As for pride, if we're doing well at work, if we're treated well at work, we need kind of agency and respect to feel that pride, right? It's essential to that. As for love, work-life balance affects our family life very, very much. This both affects kind of your need for social connection at work and your ability to connect with people in your personal life outside of work. In terms of fulfillment, having a healthy work environment is essential to kind of having the space, the ability to have a voice, to do your craft and develop yourselves and feel like you're in charge of that, right? And lastly, in terms of doing good, our industry, as we all know, has an underbelly of exploitation and kind of stepping over unpaid people, underpaid people, children creating content on platforms, exploited people, $2 an hour crunch in the global south. And it's not something that we can just kind of look past if we want to feel like we have a healthy industry, right? It's not right. So, as this hilarious stock photo of teamwork illustrates, when our well-being at work is good, this uplifts us. It helps meet all of our needs, right? And the research shows that productivity increases too. All of these things have practical benefit, even in the traditional number go up sense. It's funny how that works. And as this equally or potentially more hilarious stock photo illustrates, it's not good when we burn out. I've been there. I think most people in the games industry have been there. It's not good when you burn out, or when you're bullied out of the industry, or when you're exploited at your job. And if a game is built on the backs of workers that are treated like this, then I don't care how much money it makes or how great it is, calling it successful it's not fair. It's not right. So if we can look at all of these things, well-being and impact and also sales and quality, the traditional things in our work, how do we reflect on these things? How do we examine it and kind of move forward, right? Well, one thing is to recognize absolutely everything you take away from a project. Money is the balance sheet one. It's the one that managers care about. And if you're a manager, please care about more than this. Think about also the recognition you receive from players, from critics, from a community of people that you're building who, again, will help contribute to the health of your company, even in a financial sense, over time. The knowledge and skills that you and your team develop as you work on projects, the relationships that you build with each other, with players, and hopefully taking away a clear conscience at the end of it after everything. It's not just about the number that comes away at the end of the day. And this is especially important when you're differentiating between, the game that just makes back its budget and the studio can keep going, and the game that makes tens and tens of millions or billions of dollars. You need to look at all of these things. If the game that made millions and millions and millions of extra dollars and you have money to buy Bandcamp now, if that was at the expense of workers burning out and players spending money when they did not mean to, that game is not more successful than the game that just made back its budget, that kept its team going, that people love. And that's really the critical thing in terms of changing our mindset here. You also want to recognize the impact of time on the successes that you have. Something small that you accomplish now might be really, really important later. Cult classics exist for a reason. And some success fades with time. If that happens to you, that's okay. But remember that if you're the little guy that made something really cool that a few people are going to remember forever, there's something to take away from that in comparison to the studio that, puts out 4 smash hits in a franchise in a row that are all kind of the same, that kind of eventually fade into memory. And if you ever find yourself envious of some success that seems too good to be true, remember that sometimes certain successes are too good to be true, and it does not end very well. Another thing to consider is realism, right? Huge successes don't make small successes any less amazing. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to be up there getting Game of the Year. But besides thinking about that, when you're thinking about what you want to accomplish, also think about meeting one person who played your game and just loved it. And when you look back years later, the one person that came up to you individually and was like, I really like the thing you made. I think it's really cool. Even if you do win Game of the Year, that interaction with that one person that really loved your thing, that's probably going to mean more to you 30 years from now. It really is. But none of this is going to be easy, of course. For one thing, our culture itself is still very much number go up, and it's very hard to recognize your own success in basically any other area when most of the press goes to the big numbers. And of course, more practically, the way business gets done is not going to change overnight. I'm well aware that sticking your neck out in this industry is scary. You absolutely have to pick your battles, but just do think about any opportunity you can have to make those small changes. The biggest opposition we face, of course, is some guy who's like 14th house's 6th guest bathroom has a waiting room that looks like this. And he's like, shut up with all this hippie stuff. The system will give you 14 houses too if you just work hard, because like I only inherited $50 million. I worked for this. So what do you do in the face of all of this? Well, this is where our little posters come in, right? Solidarity is definitely the best tool we have. So really important that you talk to the people you work with. Start organizing. You always hear that word a lot, organize. It's important. Support each other. Share grievances. Share victories. You will make friends this way. You will also be able to make a little bit of change this way over time. Talk to players in terms of your project. Very, very important. There's a reason you always hear this, playtest outside your team, playtest outside your team. Human connection is going to be a recurring theme here, and players are people. They're not just consumers, right? They're not just money machines. If we want to make good games that give people good experiences and ultimately have our industry prosper, right, we need to move beyond just looking at KPIs on a spreadsheet. We need to actually talk to the people who are engaging with the things that we make. This one will be more relevant for you in this room later, apart from the adults for whom this is relevant now, though these particular adults already know this. But continuing on that theme, some of you will find yourself managing people at some point. Treat them well. Advocate for them, right? There's a point where sticking your neck out kind of becomes worth it, and it is even more worth it when that is not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of people that you have power over, that you are ostensibly mentoring, right? Push back on unreasonable demands from your subordinates when you can. Listen to what they need. Stand against crunch, even just a little bit when you can, and for work-life balance. And on the subject of management, you'll have more or less power on this depending on where you end up, but don't spend money on bullshit. Please do not do that. Don't jump on every tech bro trend. If you make it huge, don't blow it all when you could just keep your team employed and happy and secure. Do not buy Bandcamp. It's a really bad idea. Related to risk, we all know this. This is the first thing you learn in first year GDW. We all forget it anyway. Games end up in development hell. Games cost too much to finish. They cost too much to finish well. We'll all forget this anyways, but try and maybe this is the time that it sticks, maybe. But it's definitely something that we want to do. This one's a tall order, right? Pretty big. Maybe would have been better at the top of the list, but I don't know. I did make up the list. I should have put it at the top. And this is not on us as individuals, right? We're not oil magnets, but we should still do what we can. Let's get rid of console exclusives, please. Let's not tempt people who don't have a certain one of the lumps of metal and plastic in their house to get that lump because there's a game that you can only get on that lump. We're all developing on PC. You know the game runs on PC, so just make it available on PC. Let's just cool it on all the plastic merch as well. Let's tone it down a little bit. I'm not saying we can never make little figurines, but maybe we don't have to make 10,000 of every character for every game ever released just because it will sell. Small stuff, try tofu at the office lunch. Try it. I promise it's not bad. Just give it a shot. These small decisions do add up. Also, maybe if there happens to be an oil plan and you happen to have a way of shutting it down or something, maybe do that. But yeah, small decisions still matter. This is what we're doing now, right? This is all these ideas and all these actions. They're about change. And this happens over time. And we have to educate each other and the next generation of devs. We're at a university. This is why we do this here. This is vitally important here. We've got to redouble our efforts in teaching, right? We want to teach about what the world could be like, not just what the world is now. And we've got to look at success stories that don't just fit the big number good sort of mold. That can be tricky because our culture prioritizes all of those things, but kind of looking at more of those stories can help us slowly change over time. Last one here. Talking, very corny, I know, standing up for what you believe in, but it's important. Actions might speak louder than words, but sometimes making the words is the action that you've got to do, right? This is things like supporting unions, standing up for your coworkers, speaking up about unethical practices if you can. Don't get yourself fired. I mean, if you're in a financial position where you're like, you know what, I'm going to burn this company to the ground for the greater good, and I'm going to give money to all my coworkers so that they don't starve, then great. But generally speaking, this is going to be using your voice tactically when you can, smartly, to try and make those really small nudges over time. Change obviously requires a lot of these changes, but starting it and keeping it going means that we need a whole lot of noise, and we've got to be the ones to make it. So this is a lot of stuff, right, to start with. You haven't even entered your careers yet. If you can only remember one, we're gonna pick a wild card out of the middle of the list here. It's this one, because it's the easiest to forget. You see this kind of pattern repeating where, you know, someone's a student and then they become a teacher and they're great, and a lot of the time they stay great, but sometimes you get jaded over the years and then they kind of forget what it was like to be a student, and before you know it, it's like, do you not understand how much stress we're under as students? There is so much going on, and like sometimes, you know, you just want to ask for an extension because like you had a bad day and you have anxiety, and it's like feels like people don't really understand you. And then in the industry, it's the same thing, right? Everyone's a peon at first, and everyone's working long hours and taking crap from their manager and getting put down sometimes. And then sometimes you become a manager and it's great and they become a great manager, but sometimes they become a manager and it's like, and now I get to do that to the next generation of people, revenge, right? So this is really easy to forget after it's been 20 years and you've been through so much and you work your way up, and either you're a little jaded, a little angry at the world, or you get complacent, right? You get tired. So this is really, really important to remember. Not only is it easy to forget, but it also has the biggest impact on other people. And I think the best way to kind of remember this is to paraphrase a few now of the really great mentors I've been lucky to have over the years, is that you want to try and make your corner of the world, of the industry, just a little bit better. It doesn't have to be perfect, just a little bit better. Thanks for listening. And now we're going to go to the panel discussion.